the Brazilian is silvery.
That's a good scene.
Yeah, I'm curious. What's going to happen? If they could come up and sit here after, they might want to sit in the audience while the other person's reading. Well, no, we can hold them for when they talk later, and they'll have to pass the mic between them. Yeah, I think those would be fine. That's pretty good. Yes? You're very different in different colors. It's like the contrast. Of the Global Museum here and a professor of museum studies, and I'm delighted to see you all here today and for us to be able to co-sponsor this very important event that is in conjunction with this wonderful exhibit that we have. So please come back and visit us again, and it's my honor to introduce Steve, Director.
Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Steve Dickinson at the Poetry Center here. We're really delighted to have the poets Lan Duong and Khoi with us today. And this is all because of DVAN, the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network, which the director of which will come up and speak in a moment, Isabel. But I wanted to just say that we've collaborated with them in the past, and it's always been a total pleasure. They are doing incredible work that is really bringing stuff to light that is otherwise being hidden. And this kind of effort has been really a kind of mutual aid within the Vietnamese American community and the wider Vietnamese diaspora. And the exhibition here, I'm sure Isabel will have a few words about that, but the exhibition was assembled by DVAN, and it is a touring exhibition, so others can bring it to different galleries and museums. But there are calendars up here that have some events that are coming up at the Poetry Center, so if you want to know about that, we've got some fantastic people that are going to be speaking and reading their work and sharing their intelligence with us in the coming 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm going to turn it over now to my friend Isabel.
It's really wonderful to be here. This is the second event from DVAN at SFSU, right? So DVAN now has a project at San Francisco State. A little about me, I've been teaching at San Francisco State since 2001, teaching Vietnamese American literature. And I used to take my students to organize in the communities, to organize events because of recognitions that there was no space for Vietnamese American writers and poets. Southeast Asian were kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, right, in terms of, be presented. So that's how it all started. And 20 years later, right, DVAN now is their own non-profit organizations. Basically we started because, of the issue of invisibility, right? We wanted to speed up this process of visibility for Southeast Asian voices and writers and inclusions, empowerments, right, for people to come together, find the strength to speak their truth, and build communities, bringing people together, listening, speaking to another, heal, and finally educate, right? To educate because a lot of racism out there, a lot of predetermined ideas about Southeast Asians, Vietnamese Americans, so we want to fight all of that all at once. So quickly, if you want to know more about DVAN, we fulfill our missions of promoting and supporting Vietnamese American writers in the diaspora, now more Southeast Asian as well, by supporting the writers with residencies and workshops, public events such as this, right? And we have DVAN at SFSU, exhibit like this one, right? And online public event, Accented, which is hosted by Nguyen, the co-director of DVAN, who won the Pulitzer Prize in 2017. And also, during the pandemic, we decided, there's a lot of racism. It's hard for people of color to get published, right? The Nguyen is known a lot, or Saigon is known a lot, but there's a lot, there's hundreds of people who write who cannot be published. So we started to enter the publishing industries, and by the end of this year, we'll have 8 books published. So we're really glad. So, thank you for being here. But enough of DVAN. Tonight, you're all here for those fabulous poets. So I'm just going to go through their bio because you need to know the achievements. But we have to deal with my French accent. Vietnam was colonized. It's my teaching moment. So Diana, two fierce feminist women that I love, right? Poet and multimedia artist Diana Nguyen is the author of Ghosts Of, which was a finalist for National Book Award and the forthcoming collections, Root Fractures. Nguyen is a Condiment Fellow, recipient of fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, and winner of the '92 Discovery Poetry Contest and 2019 Discovery Awards. Currently, she's a core faculty at the Randolph College Law Residency MFA and an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Poet Lan Duong is also associate professor in cinema and media study at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. She's the author of treacherous subjects, gender, culture, and trans-Vietnamese feminism. Duong's creative works have appeared in Watermarks, Vietnamese American poetry and prose, bold words, Asian American writing to span the centuries, Tilting the Continents, Southeast Asian American writing, Frontiers, and the Journal of Women's Studies and Crab Orchid Reviews. And she was a co-editor with actually Kathy Nguyen, who is here, Mariam Lam, of this anthology of called Troubling Border, an anthology of Southeast Asian women that's literature and the arts. And okay, I'm going to stop now. But two amazing poets and feminists who have the courage to speak their truth. I mean, this is a very special event for all of you to be here, so please welcome our poets.
How are you all doing? And thank you for coming on a Friday evening. Very happy to be here. Thank you to DVAN, very close to my heart. I went to one of their readings a long time ago, organized by Nguyen Lan, who is here in the audience, an original gangsta. But so is Isabel, and I'm just happy to have gone through this journey with them. So I have this debut collection of poetry that's been 25 years in the making. Isabel supported me when I didn't even know that I needed the support, and so did DVAN, and I'm grateful for all of what you do. This book is sectioned off in 3 parts. The first is called The Father's House. The second, and because it's narrativized in a way where it goes from childhood to adulthood, the second part is called Ma San Jose, which means if you're not speaking, or if you don't know Vietnamese, it means motherfucking San Jose. And you just have to say it with that intonation. In Vietnamese, it's really, I mean, does everybody know what I'm talking about? So you have to elongate that D. Third part is called The Leaving. So I will read from different sections. San Jose, 1980. Long-haired, dusty, bell-bottomed, emerging like wild things from our wagon, and once again, we are what we carry. Clothes, pans, second-hand sandals. In our fists are rosaries and several scapulars each. A wooden clock in the shape of Vietnam is what Father brings into the new house. 2 battered hands on north and south. We left Butler, government cheese, a black clapboard house, railroad tracks, white Catholics sponsoring us from Vietnam to Guam. Some of them calling us gooks. No wonder we are here. No wonder we sisters speak of suicide and other dirty stories. No wonder Father cannot loses his bearings, his temper, his tongue. At 6, I am all eyes, full of spit and spite. I am here, and it's a wonder just to begin again. This is called In This House. We take refuge from the wars we had just come from, and the wars that were just beginning. Father, who has carried all his battles in his hands, tattoos his rage onto our flesh, one and one and one. He was a lieutenant colonel in the South Vietnamese Army and has lived through the French, the Japanese, and then the Americans. Wars he has known, he carefully places in the closet, a thick triangular meat of a flag, the 3 red stripes folded onto yellow. In this house, we live without the mother for far too long. She'll come later to America to reunite with her children 20 years after they left in 1975. This armchair of a woman, she does not tell us why she stayed, cannot for the life of her tell us what she did with the money. In this house, sisters' furies are born, the anger of up, blooming on their skin like watercolors, blues, and purples mostly. In this house, the eldest brother hatches a plan to take his country back from the communists. In this house, the artist brother becomes the thief first and then a runaway second. In this house, I always sleep with 2 sisters on a double bed. In this house, I grow an ache for the snaking of my arms with other arms, the muscling of my legs with their legs. In this house, I cut fish with hands that are really like broken scissors in the kitchen. I pull white hair from black heads, laying the threads on dark in exquisite reticulate patterns. In this house, I use yelsan on legs and temples, nest fists into flesh, and on summer nights, I skin my sisters' backs as if I were reading Braille, unseating pustules of acne, hard and small like grains of rice. In this house, my fingers absorb all of the family's sicknesses, their sweat and smell. This is how I know they are family. This is how I know they are mine. Not by numbers or other polite designations, but the shape of their bodies, the size of their pores. In this house, I devour my sisters' fears and strengths, every last one of them, and on days they don't want to work, I hold them still and listen, ear to belly, to the eerie sounds of thunder their stomachs make. In this house, I find the best hiding places to fold my body into 2 when the fighting becomes too intense. In this house, I touch the nub of skin between my legs and love myself open during late summer evenings. In this house, I listen to stories and scavenge for what is useful. I take the fragments with me for when I leave and come back, for when I leave and come back. This is called Sister Play. Because there weren't enough beds, I sleep with my sisters. Our legs were locked together at night. Our legs, which were like the pliers Father used to play when he played the handyman. They were hard and muscular because we took after our stout mother, our sturdy calves reminding us of where we came from, that we inherited more than just pimply backs and an ironic fear of men, but that we could endure and endure for a long time after that too. It's like this one time we're at the playground and everything around us is fire. I am holding on because she's 4 years older, gripping my legs with fingertips not yet painted with the brush of puberty. We're struggling against the smooth evil of the aluminum, our sweet girl sweat only making the slide slicker. We hold on because we have to. Take my hand, then cawing with laughter. We play until the slide becomes cool and indifferent to our skin, and we leave with the brown of bark on our elbows. We sleep well those nights, fingers laced, our strong legs hurting from our play. Muscle the other, and we lay stronger than rope, cord, or twine. to motherfucking San Jose. I stand before you with these pictures from this era called 1980s New Wave San Jose. And it's embarrassing, but it's just all about radical vulnerability today, y'all. It's true. Barbie. On our bikes, our girl bodies pitch forward like arrows on bows, while the Barbies in our hands are tightly fisted around chrome that is freckled with rust. There is spit and laughter and wind. When we round a corner at the Santee Apartments, 3 boys jump us, while one goes straight for me, his skin the color of Nukmam. An arm hooks my body like a fishing rod. His fingers cover one breast. They lay horizontal against the stripes of my sailor tee. And with the other hand, a finger pokes around inside, digs like a mechanic underneath the hood of a car. Hien is on the shorn grass, her legs spread wide open, boy hands rubbing clumsy on her crotch. Her white Vans are stained a beautiful Kelly green. Finally, a car comes through, and they run away. But even so, they're kicking stones, fists raised. We mount our bikes then, taking time to avoid pitted streets, while our Barbie's eyes are sparkling pretty. Okay. This is called We Refugee. I identify as a refugee. When we came, I was 3, 1975. So this book is really an homage to this refugee girlhood that does not have a voice in American literature as of yet. And I'd like to give voices to those young girls. Thank you, Cheryl. We refugee. We refugee. We be running schemes, scoring money from men who just came by boat, without wives, kids, some of them re-educated, most of them broke. We refugee. We be hanging at the pool hall talking to Jutiet, who loops his belt twice. He bends his car antenna in the shape of a heart, asking me nice, am tit come? We refugee, we be folding napkins, 2 cents each, cutting peaches at the cannery off Meridian, smelling like industry at least once a week. We refugee, we be slamming waves at the beaches, fighting at the rink, saying, hey, what's up? 2 hands cupped in air to all the fly guys in their caparichis. We refugee, we be straddling these here streets with the cowboys on Capitol and King, Center and Story, listening to our own badass beats. So as young girls, we went clubbing a lot. Does it sound familiar? We went and always fighting. Still fighting after many, many years. This is called The Edge. Yai has a sick-ass car, a beautiful teal Honda Civic with subwoofers as big as coffins. We ride with him to the edge. Our fake IDs get us in, and then drenched in hip-hop beats, our sex as thick as legs in denim shorts. The guys with their rooster hair leaning against the wall, they're a quivering skyline, and then we're trembling to that deep bass. Keep jingling, baby. People call us the Great Wall of China, but we don't care. They don't fuck with us, and we don't fuck with you. Until someone does, and then first it's the fists, and second the kicks, then outside for a smoke. Yai taps a cigarette with a long fingernail, lights it up, passes it around. Me, him, Jin, and Thumb were savoring the click The burn of the thing, the smoke, sucked deep into our young lungs. Under the lights, Yoi's hair hangs off to the side like a cliff. Keys in one hand, jangling, sweating, mating. They say that when his homie died off the 17, Yoi cried like a bitch. But tonight, he's calm, he's excellent. I'm eyeing his car high from the smoke, and I think that, hell yeah, the color of cool is teal. And then he asks, "Em đi chơi không?" It's 1 a.m., and even though I know he will call me a whore, and even though I know Yoi has 5 T's tattooed on his left hand for thin, tu, toi, and tu, I go. Three times. 1, he drives on St. James Street, encapsulated in his shit brown 85 Toyota Corolla. He doesn't recognize me, doesn't hear the loud honking. At 68, his hands grip the wheel. He's terrified of looking to the left or right, just straight ahead. 2, he boils rum home for me when I'm home every now and then. The slender tendrils of drab green, once the color of his fatigues, lie on a plastic Chinese plate. A small bowl of nước chấm, swirling with garlic, is placed nearby. Like the monk that he was supposed to become, my father has never put enough ugh in the sauce, not allowing the bite of the chili sting on his tongue. 3, Ba, I call out. I find him on the double bed. His bulbous veins are the noodles we used to eat on Sunday mornings. They are roped around his hands. He is humming Ave Maria. In a voice mauled by all the Marlboros he smoked, he tells me he's cried for me on 3 occasions in our lovely but brutal life together. 1, when we're picked up at shore. 2, when he finds an American hospital in Guam because I'm running a high fever. 3, when I go to preschool for the first time and the nuns of Butler usher me in. I am smiling, he says, when I leave him behind. I'll just go into the 3rd part, and then I'll run there and finish this portrait with my mother. My mother's Buddha. She is. Her brown sweater torso lies in front of me on a single bed. She's claimed hers for the next 3 months. My mother's Buddha. She likes to leave. Đi lang thang, my sisters tell me. I bunch the thick knit of sweater up and around her neck. Her skin has collapsed like heavy socks. Her back as wide and clean as a cutting board. My sisters tell me that the pustules of acne are strands of pearls she has lovingly passed down to us. They tell me we're heirs to her generosity when she wandered around villages, gambled, burned money without prayers, on solid legs that did not lend her any roots. My mother's Buddha. Now, pushing the ache from her body, I see her back. It only shows traces of fight. The anger of faint bird tracks on a barren road. So just a bit about the title of the collection. Nothing Follows is what was written on a lot of government letters, on state documents, when we came to the U.S., and it pretty much demarcated the idea that there were no other details that were to follow. Even though they've asked for copious amounts of medical histories of whether or not my father was a criminal, whether or not we were communists or not. So Nothing Follows is taken from state documents, and as I say, in the wake of war, everything follows. So this book is a testament to the lie that nothing follows. And so this poem is called Nothing Follows. He's surrounded by walls that exhale smoke 2 fans hover above him, their blades sweeping close. He begins and ends the day by talking to himself in 3 different languages, legs crossed, foot tapping to a Catholic song. His thumb and finger form a hole like Clinton's during a speech. He's talking about the past. Guacu, le passé, the recent past, as in mới đây, or le passé récent. Or yesterday, like hôm qua and hier. Today, hôm nay and aujourd'hui. And even now, bây or maintenant. But his words are weeds that have followed him here from north to south, then west. He's raised soldiers for daughters. He hates his own skin. He hates his own kin. His stories about his children, the ones who did well and the ones who did shit. My sisters want him to stop talking. Now. They say he remembers too much, talks too much. They say he's become lamduit, fussy like a woman. Now he lives alone, save for a boy who answered his call to share fall for 100 a week in the newspaper Thang Ma, the town crier. So I will end with this. As much as this book is an homage to sisters and my family, it's also an homage to the friends who I grew up with. So this is called Where the Wild Things Are. One, aching for the girls we left behind. We bark with throats coated in smoke. We've rumpused and ruckused on some unnamed island. Tattoos one night in Mexico, coming down from ecstasy and shrooms. 2, our so 80s, right? Or 90s. 2, our bodies now are sheltering sick, handed down by sisters, brothers, uncles, aunts, dioxins from the other country, the pins holding us to this here past. 3, the years stretch out between us when our bodies were trained to be girl boys, good girls, pretty young things, and the sex we once held between our legs, furious and furiouser still. 4, we still light up every now and then, one finger of a cigarette, one long drink of XO, a toast to the girls we once were. Thank you so much for So it's my pleasure to introduce Diana to the stage.
There's one seat up here. If your thighs, gluteus maximus, is that the word for the buttocks? Why did I say it like that? If anybody wants to sit, you're not scary. It's just an invitation for you to sit. I'm really awkward, I'm sorry. There's a seat, yeah. Okay, well, that invitation will remain the same. I'm just going to try to orient so I can also hold my view. Thank you to DVAN for this wonderful event. Like Isabel and staff, Christina, Cheryl, and the other people whose names I don't know that also made this happen. The Global Museum for hosting the exhibit in space, and Steve from the Poetry Center for also like recording and live streaming this. To the people, the virtual people I don't see, and the people who are here who are like just listening. I've never been in a space like this. And when I say like this, I'm referring to like that there are non-familial bodies who feel like familial bodies, which is to say, even though many people here are strangers, it feels safer for me to be here than my own family, which is its own kind of thing, which we can get into. Oh my gosh, which is to say, like, I'm so grateful that your book is now in the world. Like, as I was listening, I was like, I wish I had that as a 9-year-old, as a 13-year-old, you know, like just the feralness of it, the metal of it, just like the unruly, like just like the beingness of it. I think there was like a line, like the one about the nub between the legs and the love myself. I was like, yes. You know, like not anybody talk to you about that. Anyway, we could talk about that or not. Just to say, like, I'm just really so excited to chat. I don't have any visuals. That's an awkward visual. Can I turn this off? I feel like that's distracting. Sorry, I'm not super persnickety, but I don't like the no signal. Yeah, I don't know. Makes me feel like I'm supposed to have something plugged into my body. I'm gonna read new work because I've been thinking a lot about my parents and relatives and myself as like a second generation, which is to say, like, I've been thinking about diaspora, I've been thinking about family, kin, and kith, right? And how memories get transmuted and perverted, and how those memories are just as real. Like, for example, after my brother passed, my sister and I uncovered old home videos, and we digitized them, and I don't think anybody watched them, like, growing up. So it was so weird, one, to see, like, my brother is alive, but also number two, like, look, like, that's me as a 5-year-old speaking fluent Vietnamese. I'm not a fluent Vietnamese speaker now, right? But so I also realized, like, oh, I used to speak Vietnamese, and then there was many decades where I did not, and actually a couple years ago I took Vietnamese 1 in college with undergrads. Yes, that was me. Which is to say, anytime I pronounce anything, you have a sense of like somebody who lost this first language and who's trying to come back to it and form literacy. So we can talk about that too. Okay, I'm talking a lot, but I'll just read now. Subjunctive. What advances, spilling over seagrass, smudging pock marks off the floor? Off the floor of her bunker, my mother lifts her heels so she might see. This is as tall as she'll ever be, and even in hiding, she grows toward light. Though she cannot see them, she knows how clams nudge deeper under cover. One limb slips out from a crack. Slipping into sand is like slipping into shadows where running takes the form of waiting. Many years later, her daughter rewinds the mother's wedding, rewinds and pauses, pauses and rewinds, trailing a finger along the wrinkles of the transferred tape. There you are, when I find the woman I know, in a girl I'll never meet. Rake your hands slowly through the mud until you run into something. The bride lifts her gloved hand to ward off sun. Buddha help us when we go to war. I had been doing a long sequence. And just don't want to think about titles. I just titled them all the same thing, and the title is Doi Moi, and that refers to a very specific kind of period of economic reform in Vietnam. But for me, like I remember when I first encountered that phrase, I had my like several layers removed approximation definition of a word. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like, and to me, a new time, which could be correct, but that's not how one thinks about it. So I'm thinking about like, what does that mean, renewal, like a turning of a new leaf. At the site where the wound will occur, we know that she was in the garden, the one she had cultivated, seed by seed, slowly after moving in with her husband and their 11 children, all of them together again after years of separation. Her husband's and son's feet in America, her daughters and hers in Vietnam. For first in Saigon, then a place unmentioned by the coast, underground, in hiding, waiting to make a successful bride, so they might board a vessel, any vessel, collective bride in dark waters facing an unknown stage. Boom, boom, she whispered to my mother. Butterfly, the word my mother used to reference our genitals, two cupped wings like a heartbeat. Boom, boom. In hiding all that year, unmentioned by the coast, my mother as a young girl had her first period, its dark liquid unseen in their nest underground. Boom, boom, the smear of red between my thighs, perfectly symmetrical. Two lips pressed together as if to kiss or to strike. It's funny because my mother and I, we don't talk about what I write about, but she Googles me because she's a software developer. I know. Gotta be careful what you say on the internet about mom. But all she said to me once, she's like, you have the wrong diacritical mark on boom boom. That was it. I know, but, you know, she's like, okay, great, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. I know what you saw then. You know, and then like, yeah, I don't know. We could talk about that too. Displacement of attention. Oh, mother. Sometimes the skin's surface needs to break or be cut in order for healing to begin. The majority of antivenoms are administered intravenously. That is, they take place within or inside a vein. Fang into flesh, needle through than under the skin. In a lab, someone will seek to understand the biomechanics of spider fangs so as to inspire new medical devices. Into her body, my father's mother administers insulin. When examined up close, our pores make a canvas for needlepoint. Health questionnaires do not ask if there is a history of violence in your family. To the question not asked, I want to ask, how many generations should I go back? When I dress exactly as my mother did on her honeymoon, is it not mimicry? One creature evolving to resemble another in advantageous anti-predator adaptation. But what if your predator also looks like you? At first, no one in the family notices anything because time in the house acts very much like a frozen stream in spring. Everything melts, albeit not uniformly, and so there are bits cut off from the body that once was whole and trapped in the rocks and rootwork. Some ice melts later than others. It is only a matter of time before re-entry, but when I left home, I did not think I would come back. In departure and return, we recognize the difference in each other, detect what absence has now made foreign. 37 years after fleeing Vietnam, my mother shields her body with my father's as I trail behind them on a street in Ho Chi Minh City. Here, Chi Sera, she whispers, where now motorbikes move as if murmuration, spilling around us as we cross. In the wounded daughter, a recognition of the wounded mother, a way of understanding where we are, even if divided. The storm can disperse seeds due to high altitudes, as war displaces parts to a whole. Between parent and child, coiled strands that sequence and distinguish their beings. I think of my mother's hair, braided or unraveled, how it grows, even as she cuts it. Oh man, so much mother stuff. The longer they remained hiding by the coast, the sooner no one would know where they were any longer, or if they were. Underground, where everything is concealed, Khoi and her 5 daughters learned to discern each other's rustlings. An unseen hand lifting black chopsticks thrice against the lip, grain by grain, the grain of one sister's whisper disappearing into another. They name each object and each other. Mẹ, cơm, đũa, nước. But in such darkness, words can stand for so much more. A tether that threads through them to daylight, hands clasped between each body like beads nestled between tight knots. Isn't this how storytelling works, where one dream stops before another starts? Each day takes us further away from who we once were to who we soon will be. Into my dry eye I drop an artificial tear as across a global crisis for wine does the same, though her eyes are now a foggy mirror. She looks away from me as she speaks, and I watch her reflection in the sliding door. Does our memory not furnish the journey of our unfinished existence? I have been doing these because, oh my gosh, in my PhD, I had an advisor who said, don't call it interviews, then you don't have to do IRB. Okay. So I did these conversations with folks of Vietnamese descent, family members and strangers that I would meet. But when my grandmother was alive, I also sat with her and also asked some pretty just open-ended questions. Like one question was where does your story begin? I'm curious, because I don't want to lead people to areas of trauma, or so I'm just curious what people call from memory. And it was actually in San Jose that my grandmother and I had that conversation. So now that I'm back in the Bay Area, I'm just thinking about the past times that I've been in this space. I've not really read this one before, so this is called Omnidirectional, and it's after Nguyen and Lan, because when she reads a poem that's in columns, she just reads only some of the words in whatever order she feels like. I love it. Yeah, but it's also like it's a mood. Today I feel like 3 words, and today I feel like 21, and you just read whatever you feel like. Yeah, I kind of love it. It's like a word bank. Although I said the word bank once at work, aka at the university, and these other humanities professor was like, you're a poet, why would you say word bank? It's like economics, like why? And I was like, word pantry, okay, word pantry. So I'm trying to rewrite that, word pantry. I know. Okay, so I had a conversation with my father, and my parents never told me their refugee immigration stories, because I don't know why they didn't want to tell me. We could talk about that too. But only when I was doing this project for research, quote, research for my PhD, so something, quote, official, but they were like, okay, we'll sit down and do this recorded conversation. I know. So you can always make that up if you want to talk to your parents about things they don't usually want to talk about, and you just say it's for school, and they'll do it. So I started to transcribe what my father was saying. These are just like some phrases. Okay, this is a long wind-up for who knows how many words I'll read. Omnidirectional, after me and Nikim. This is from the So Hu Nguyen transcript. Just the money. Because we know for sure. Find a place to stay. Somebody to sponsor. Forget everything. The smell. I worry too much. Just imagine. To kill time. Took us to the US of A. Sit low. Forget everything. Can you imagine? I am your father. We know for sure. No line for hot dogs. We didn't know why. Particularly mother. Wake Island. Question. C-124. To kill time. Already chaos. American soldier. Son. Find a place to stay. Everyone on the floor. That was my intro to just end on two dad poems. Started with mom. I feel like this is tons of familial community portraits, and I love thinking about the lyric mode as a portraiture too. The world beyond tennis in 1968 found the United States divided by racial unrest and the war, where my father entered his teens, accustomed to the sound of distant bombs on his daily walks to school, where he spoke the language of a recent colonizer, where nuns punished his palms with sticks. Tennis, from Old French for hold, receive, and take, all words familiar to those who advance without permission. But in this game, there are rules, and pray that the arbiters favor your side. Along with her occupiers, tennis migrated to Vietnam, where only the most privileged held a racket. It's not likely my father picked up the game in Saigon, but perhaps he glimpsed the lizard green quartz from across the street where he would have been shot for walking, the same street we walked 26 years later, my father moving slowly as if unsure of the year. He doesn't speak much, but knows the strings of his rackets as well as his own children, mending them as they break. It was his marriage that broke him, not the war, not even the loss of a son, which will have happened decades later. Is the fork not an instrument held before a child's mouth, both of them quiet as father feeds son? No, son, not quiet. Look at his hands, they're humming. When we found small tins tucked in unused drawers and unnoticed parts of the fridge, we fingered the language we would later recognize as his second. The one on Lanoi nudged him toward because he was their eldest, and shouldn't the eldest integrate with the whites of that time? Within a month upon arrival, my father and his brother enrolled in engineering courses at Pasadena City College, taking shifts as attendants in the school parking lot. As his heavy eyelids lowered on their evening bus ride, shadows of palm trees washing over his face, did he think for a moment that he was back home? In California, the palm provides neither shade nor sustenance. This tree is ornamental, but we know what happens when naphthenic and palmitic acids are dropped on it. Burr, I tried to read, suspicious of the tin's greasy substance. I did not think to taste it, fearing bitterness, or worse, what if it burned me? Both child and refugee learn the words that surround them as well as words that mean harm. With the palm of his hand, a father may soothe or signal, but what about the palm that holds a child down gently so that a mother may strike? Thank you.
Are you going to say it too? Okay. Should we just pass the mic around?
Yes. Discussion.
This is the best part.
Uh-oh. I think it's taped in here or something.
Okay. Well, I don't know about you guys, but this woman has the power to send chill all over your body.
So just have a minute, a few seconds to breathe through those words, those power words that you have. So we'll have a bit of a discussions, and then we'll open for Q&A. So, when I'm listening here to your voice, I just thought of, in 2003, Lithium 3 wrote the gangster we all looking for, you heard that, read about, and I saw in that text, and I see in your words also some tensions between, she had these tensions between the need to tell the story and the need to not to want to reveal to an outsider's gaze and reader's gaze, something that is very private. Or here, the tensions between wanting to tell, to remember, but also to want to protect others, maybe father or the young self or parents. So I just see, if you have something to say about this. I felt it very much strongly related into his work, and I wonder, 20 years later, if it's something that you also hold, that tension as you write, and then you share your poems with the audience.
Thanks for that question. This question about what to share and what not to share, what to tell and what to tell, and what not to tell has been with me for so long. This has been 25 years in the making, and the reason why it took so long is because I didn't know if I wanted to share such trauma and intergenerational trauma and what the impacts of the war mean for my particular family. So, and I didn't want this voice to be appropriated by others who would see this as indicative of Vietnamese refugee pain. So there is so much joy that I also wanted to interweave into this, and I tell people that my friends are here from San Jose that we put the hoe in San Jose. And the reason why I say that is because they were also fun times, and there was joy, there was sexual desire, energy, and some of that energy was channeled into fighting, and I think that we use that as an outlet for the other things that we've been repressed by. So I've been struggling a lot with the things I want to tell, but now I want to tell everything. Now you can't stop me from telling everything. Everything follows. Everything follows. I am very much taken by this need to tell all, as a way to bear witness, as a way to archive, as a way to document what it is that I've seen and experienced.
I love that, this desire to tell all now as a form of witness, but also having agency in terms of representation of an experience. I feel like I really wish I had your book right when I was growing up, because my parents weren't talking about the past. We weren't super close with family because they were fighting all the time, and that wasn't, joyful by any means, and I felt so isolated. I think my reaching out always came, to white narratives of the Vietnam War, and that was how I began to piece together things, which is only one small kind of facet dimension. But growing up was hell. Yeah. And you couldn't talk about it. It wasn't safe to talk about it to folks at school. It was predominantly white. I grew up in Southern California, but a very different, specific enclave where there weren't a lot of BIPOC folks. I remember being so bitter as a child. It was there's that point where at first you're born, your parents are gods, and then all of a sudden you're oh, they're wrong. They're really wrong. And then you're oh, shit. Because we're reading and we're learning stuff in school. And then you have to do this reconciliation where you're well, I'm not going to call child services on them because they provide me with food and shelter, and then where would I go? And then there's this, but they're also but they hurt us, right? They're violent. And there's this way in which you're trapped. And I remember as a child, all I kept saying to myself was one day I'm going to write about all of this. I never did. That's its own kind of way to get through. But then when and I wasn't never trying to become a writer, and then when I did start writing, it's funny because I went to predominantly programs that were white mentors, white writers that we were reading, And so you know what I was writing about? Hansel and Gretel. I know. German folktale about an abusive, like, witch, right? And then abusive stepmother, you know, like, I was like, yeah, and then that was my way to talk about mom. I know. Not anymore. Like, there came a point where I was like, wait a minute. AKA my brother died, and I was like, fuck everything. I'm just gonna talk about, like, let's strip off the whitewashing in my imagination, and let's just talk about, like, I don't have to talk about my mother directly because she's not like a monster in the folklore, right? She's a byproduct of war, legacies of like multiple forms of colonization. She's part of this ongoing river in which I'm now part of too, and so then it's like writing became like not just like to tell all, but like how do I untangle the messiness that I am implicated into, you know? I don't know. I don't know if that made any sense. But...
I had made that promise to her when I was 10, saying, you know, I will write, you know, to get back at them. And I finally let it go. Lan, you know, she's a poet and she's also a feminist critic and academic. She wrote this book, we wrote this book, about Diasporic Vietnamese artists and writers and filmmakers. When you really point out that, you know, like men, you know, Vietnamese American men or diasporic men, you know, do a lot of art and they can get away with a lot of freedom of expression. Though for women, you know, artists and writers and poets, there's so much that is there to shame you, to silence you, and then if nobody else beats you up, you beat yourself up for speaking out, telling your truth, right? So I just want to point out to say, you know, to speak even like so many years later, you know, it takes courage, you know, to do this because it's like inside voice that, you know, it's nobody outside to be there to do it. It's inside, and that's what power lies when that voice is so loud you don't express yourself. So, you know, thank you for having that courage, you know. So my next question is about loss. You know, when I was reading your book, Lan, there's a lot of ideas about San Jose and, you know, and refugees and poverty and violence. And then when I read your poems, and I feel all of that, I see all of that, but also, you know, that poem that you read about the sisters whose legs are entangled and muscular, there's something like almost like missing this intimacy that was there without thinking, you know, it's just, so a sense of loss of that intimacy from that time. So in a way, it complicates notions that may have about poor refugees. Right? It's not black and white. And Diana too. When you talk about loss, I mean, this, there's this quote in your book here, Ghost, that say, "Tell me that what we lost as collateral is also a gift. Lost is also a gift." I mean, I'm just sitting with that word, right? Words matters, like poets, and it just reminds me, in Buddhism, it's like you don't become the lotus unless there is mud, right? Through the mud, through the pain, through the loss, through the suffering, you gain a perspective. You use the word. There's a gift associated with loss. So maybe address that. Missing this time in San Jose, although it was a lot of fighting and poverty and tough. So tough. And maybe, things that you don't want to say to protect whoever out there, but I feel this way not all easy, right? And yet missing it, and the loss and pain and suffering as a gift that give you, a perspective that is not only about you, but something bigger than you, and make you, the poets that you are. So something about that.
All right. Well, I'm glad you brought up the first book that I wrote, because years ago, but I have very particular positions about how women of color writers are often, this is a quote from Chin Thich Minh Ha, language stealers, and we need to be, because there has been very little discourse that has been granted us, and to steal is to be to follow Fred Moten's words from the Undercommons, is to appropriate and take back. So it's that kind of pilfering from the past that I think is productive. One of the things that impels me forward in the writing is anger. And I think of Audre Lorde's, the uses of anger and how productive that might be. And another emotion or thing that I grapple with and I think is also productive is grief. So both rage and grief, I think, do things, make things, are points of creation. So I think this is where a lot of our poems interweave with one another, because there is great pain and great loss, but at the same time there is an energy, a force that's being produced. And so from loss, I absolutely believe in gifts.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, when you mentioned the anger, like, I have so much anger, and I feel like that's not an emotion for like a female presenting body that's acceptable, especially like daughter. But there's so much anger for so many reasons, whether it's injustice. I don't know. I'm just thinking about anger, and I'm fixating on that word because so folks who might not know much about my family, but this is now public knowledge. My youngest brother. I only have one brother. I have a sister and I have a brother. My brother took his life in 2014 in the garage of the house that we grew up in. I left the day I turned 18, he left in death, my sister moved out at the age of 33 during the pandemic. And yeah, I have tremendous grief over his death, but I also had tremendous rage, which I know is also like Kubler-Ross stage of grief for sure. But then there was like all of these other feelings that you're not allowed to talk about in a eulogy. Like relief, like who else didn't die, that the violence was self-contained. We don't talk about that, right? We also don't talk about the violences that precede a suicide, or at least that didn't happen at this particular funeral. But he brought that line up about my family. I don't know if it's because they came from very formative years in which resources were limited, but they're obsessed with what there is in absence of. And I think that is probably pretty integral to, in some degree, an immigrant imagination. And that's how I was raised. But that's hard. That's a hard way to look at the world, right? Like what we don't have enough of, or what is not sufficient. And honestly, what really helped as I moved through the months of my brother no longer being here, was really to think about like, what is present? Like shit, how's it spring again? Like quite literally. I know that sounds kind of maybe trite, but like, just thinking like, well, what continues to live? Like, oh, my parents who are older now, they're not the same bodies. Okay, this is a long-winded way. the other thing that I'll share is like, I just started writing because I was angry. I didn't think I was going to publish anything. I was going to share it with my sister as like a kind of sisterly thing. Like, we're like, wow, our family is so fucked up. I'm going to write this thing so we can like free ourselves of this fucked upness and then move on, you know? Like, I thought that would be it. Well, okay, shoot. Then I made it a public endeavor, so now we're all talking about it. What I didn't know, and this is actually a gift, that because I made my grief process public, it gave my parents permission to talk about my brother openly with me and my sister. Like, not like as a big meeting sit down, but like Thanksgiving, totally brought up my brother's name, and instead of shame and silence and weirdness, and like, it was just a natural part of the conversation. That's a fucking gift. You know, like, we don't go through therapy, no. But like, that, something about like, it being less shameful, or like nobody was like, oh, look at you, your family, like, you lost a son, you know, like nobody did that. It was like that in my family though, but in the public it wasn't like that. It's like, you know, I've lost a father, I've lost, you know. So thinking about like, how do these painful things, what might need, like what, yeah, okay, that's a wound, but what else is there around it that we might like just treasure? You know, because we're still alive and we're going to keep living, and so I'd rather focus on what the presence is, you know. So,
It just remind me of one time the writers and Lan said, oh, you know, when there is a you know, you're in a family, you have writers born in a family, you really messed up, right? Because, you know, you can escape. But what I hear what he's saying is that you have the writers in the family, it's a blessing, you know, it's not a shame, it's, you know, it's a gift. Talking about anger, you know, both of you, when I think of both of you, I used to be scared of both of you. I have to say, I remember Lan, you know, like, I mean, I'm just, you know, I love both, right? I just, you know, I just want to get a little icebreaker here. I remember one time, you know, she just gets a phone call and, you know, and say, oh, you have to decide what to do with DVAN because, you know, you need to back up this organization in Los Angeles. I was like, I don't know what they're doing over there, but, you know, there's Vala has this exhibit of art in the communities, and then we have to side with them. I said, well, I don't know what they do, but set aside, otherwise, you know, the person from DVAN is quit. And I said, oh, who's that? And then I just remember Lan, you know, this was this exhibit of Vietnamese American work, and there was one art that was, you know, with the stripes, you know, with you representing or evoking communism, and people in the community protested so much with, especially the women organizers, and Lan was like fierce, you know, fighting, you know, saying, you know, this is a place to, you know, to speak. We have put into context, in historical context, all this artwork, but, you know, if artists want to say, you know, do this image, you know, we have to embrace it. And it was, you know, it was like so much courage, and I was, you know, I remember at the time, I was always, I mean, for me, I'm the opposite. I'm like scared, brave, I'm scared. You know, I say, no, we don't, you know, disturb everything, but at the end, I say, you know, we come together and write a piece to speak about our difference. And I remember, you know, when I first met you, you really scared me too. We shared a dish, and I said, oh gosh, the good French fries, and garlic French fry, I picked one, ooh, what did I do? It's like, Isabella, can you do this? And now, since, you know, you've been a mother, I think if I pick one of the French fries, you get more, right? So, you know, motherhood that changed, right? Something about Buddhism and the prominence, right? Changed, and this more like generous women that both of you are, right? So anger is a force, it's powerful, but it's also sometimes it can hurt you, you know. So it's good to be mindful of this anger and how to manage it and to hold it as you hold an angry cat and pet it and say, it's okay, and then it's go away. Anyway, transition to my next and last question, so we have room for answering questions. It's going to be about food. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes from both of you related to food and ask you to think about that and maybe speak about that, and then we open up the floor for questions. Okay, so with Lan, let's just read it. Okay, and I don't speak Vietnamese, so I eat mad oat. That's how you say it? Oh, okay. Like my mother's and all of my sisters, is chili peppers, chili powder, chili flakes, anything that makes me hiss with pain, a ritual of eating it when he isn't around, and even later when he is. I'm going to ask you about this. Well, maybe I'll just go one after, so because it's a little bit different the way we talk about food. But what I found, and then you speak about this eating other part in the book, hot pepper, and eat the hot pepper, and then your dad said, don't eat the hot pepper, and you eat more of the hot pepper. And then, to a point that it really hurts you, I don't know, and I found that, dang, I mean, talk about, the critics, that's a good metaphor for something. but the impulse of eating something, putting something in the body to hurt yourself, and yet finding pleasure with that, you can't stop it. I want you to talk about this. I mean, we also critics, like elsewhere, we talk about Lan Duong, he talks about food for Asian American literature, about, this necessity and extravagance, right? Necessity, poverty, extravagance, art, what you do when you need to survive in poverty, and what you do when, when art and she has this whole metaphor about food and when you eat, and when I read, how you use the chili pepper, I just want to, say what does it represent for you, and what were you thinking about, and is that something to, my sense about this impulse to hurt yourself without having, and almost like a spite. Father said, don't do it. I said, yeah, I'm going to do it.
Okay, well, thanks for asking about it. It is, it underlies a lot of the imagery of the poems, because I grew up on it, and I like to say that, because my mother was Khoi, that she introduced me to this through my sisters and through her, that I have this love for spicy foods. But for me, metaphorically too, it is a lineage of anger, of fear, heat, and of something that we have given, she has passed down to us. It's what we've inherited, this tongue. And part of the kind of feminist criticism I do is to look at gendered subjects or women characters and the way in which they put things in their bodies and as ways to resist patriarchal norms and constructs against the gendered body. So I think feminist tropes have always thought about things that go into the body, that control your own body. And if you do it yourself, then I feel like that's an agentive act. So in a lovely book called Nervous Conditions by a South Rhodesian African writer, she writes about the character who's undergone colonialism, post-colonialism, and she starts to put all these different things in her mouth. She becomes anorexic, So it's a way of controlling the body and taking it back from patriarchal constraints. And so that is part of the impetus for talking about that which hurts.
I knew it.
Yeah, thank you. And then Diana, also, you make those references about food, and when I'm going to share a few quotes, I'm thinking like, when we think of immigrations and refugee, often we think of progress, and here people, come here and struggles and thrive, right? There's a lot of those narratives there. But when I pay attention to your words, I see there's a very strong human cost of immigrations that is often not discussed and talked about, and I see that in between the silence, between the words. And I read a couple of quotes. On their flights to America, the choice for lunch was rice or pasta. But when the meal cannot reach them, there was only pasta. And my father smiled at the flight attendant and asked, "Why didn't you reap enough rice? Why didn't you reap enough rice?" Right? So something about loss and lack of sustenance, right? With maybe this image. But there is also these other quotes that also just like earlier sent chill in my body. Let's get on with it. When I return to that house, I eat the food left out for my dead brother. I don't waste much. I slide open and close his closet and tangle. So here, in addition to speaking about the loss that comes with immigrations, maybe, also, eating the food of your brother that is past, inheritance trauma, and I don't know if is something similar than what Lan speak about, eating something you don't want to eat, but you have to eat, and, and your take on that in relations to those metaphors of food, if they are metaphors.
Yeah, can I just say, I really love it when people paint bad portraits of me. No, I really do. It's kind of like that move in social media when people post like ugly, and you're like, not perfect. Anyway, thank you, Isa. I love you. Yeah. Oh gosh, forgive everybody when I'm hungry. Okay, so I have a really lay understanding of feeding the ancestral altar. Right, so when my brother first died, my parents would just put 3 meals a day, every day, like perpetually replenishing the candle. And growing up, I never saw anybody what did they do with that food at the altar? I don't know. I'm sure somebody here will tell me. I just assumed it disappeared. But I know for a fact that with the altar, my parents wouldn't eat it. But they're also they don't waste food, so they would make my sister eat it. I'm laughing because I think of it as the food is there to feed the ghost, so then I now think this food is soulless, this oatmeal, these eggs, this tikka, it's now soulless, And my sister's whatever, I'll eat it, I'm not Buddhist, and I was kind of mortified, so whenever I would visit, I would eat it. I'd be okay, I'm gonna eat this first. Has the ghost eaten it? I will now, eat the shadow food. I don't know what I have to say about that other than I kind of love that we feed and we nourish those who are no longer here. But there's also this kind of thinking of I'm thinking about my sister. I'm not so much thinking about my brother's ghost, but I'm thinking about my sister and that must be weird. And I'm thinking about my sister too, sorry, now this is a lot of sharing. She was still living in that house. She doesn't talk about it, but she's the one who found my brother's dead body when she came home. And she had to call my parents, who were actually living in a different house. That's another story. And she doesn't have language for these complicated feelings of what it means to see signs that something is wrong and then to go look for the brother. Where is he in the house? Right? And now she's eating his food, And I'm the bad daughter that went so far away from home, never to return. And so when I like the least I can do is be like, let me eat that oatmeal. I hate raisins. I will eat those raisins. I'll eat it all. You know, I'll clean those dishes. Yeah, eating. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but those are just things that I was thinking about. Yeah.
Oh, I guess it's time
Yes.
to converse.
Yes. So thank you so much, and yeah, it was a positive observation of you. Thank you. Yes, it was very thoughtful, response here. So any questions for our folks?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the reading and the conversation. I think what's really interesting to see now is that I feel like the younger generation, like I'm seeing kids in high school and early college, it's like cool to be Vietnamese now, and it's really thanks to you all and the community that you all have built in making being Vietnamese cool. So I know there's some young people in the crowd here. I don't count myself amongst them, but I know I see some around. There's one sitting next to me here. And so I'd love to ask, what kind of words of wisdom or guidance do you have for this younger generation coming out there? So they're like very tech savvy, they're very connected, they're very, I think, grounded and connected. So yeah, what kind of words do you have for them?
In terms of writing or creating?
Yeah, writing and creating and sharing.
So part of what held me back was I thought that there would be no audience. And so I decided now, just recently, that I will create my own audience. And so with that kind of clarity, it really gave me a lot of freedom to say what I wanted and to say fuck it and be okay with it. But it's really important to find that impetus to create your own readership. And people would say it would be for, you write for yourself, but I don't think so. I write for that young girl that I was, and I write for the other young women that I address in my work.
Yeah, I would echo what you just said there. I think the other part to that too is I was raised to be like the A student, and that part of being an A student to me was knowing exactly what everybody wanted of me and then giving it to them, but not learning anything. Sadly, I was like, I know the exact numbers to get the A minus, or like to get the 93.5% or whatever, and then in that I erased myself. So what am I trying to say? My advice, if I could share something or wish something for a younger version of myself, for anybody who might wish to receive it, is don't censor yourself. There's so many expectations internally and externally, but when it's just you and the page, be curious, be playful, let the unsightly things come out. Nobody else has to see it. Maybe even for 25 years. But you have to give yourself permission first. And not even just giving permission, but also how might you create conditions to nourish those parts of yourself that maybe nobody else asked about or looked after. I feel like now, as I'm approaching 40, am I only beginning to feel such tenderness for these parts that I really tried to squash or hide. What a shame. But I think the younger generations are already doing this, so shit, how much more cool can it be? You're going to be so self-actualized way sooner than it did for me. So that's, I guess, what the first the first advice. Yeah, I think there's a hand. Is it T?
Hi. Thank you for being here. Oh, wait, I didn't know you were here. We all love Cheryl. The best snapper in there. I want to ask a question for old people now. Because Diana, you just gave yourself away, and Lan, paid attention. So 3 years old in 1975. So you're both like Gen X, and I feel like I've heard from young folks there's sometimes a complaint like, oh, not another book about the Vietnam War, you know. And I get it, totally get it, for young people, and yet I am this old person who still has quite a bit of grieving to do about it because it is my experience, right? And we who are in this particular age group are this bridge generation between the elders who are fully in it and the young people who didn't experience it, right? So I guess like it's such a weird thing still to be Vietnamese because there's so much painful past, but it's been quite erased except what we bring up to talk about. And so then we have this, you know, burden of bringing it up and talking about it. So I guess like I wonder, how do you feel, what do you feel is like, what's left to still grieve? What more of this process of grieving is there to be done? How would you articulate that to the young folks and the old folks in this continued role that you play as a bridge?
Yeah, it's so hard to talk to 18-year-olds because I teach film studies at USC, and they have no understanding of the Vietnam War. And to make that alive for them is just a lot of work. But I do tell them that I'm in front of you because the US was there. And so that makes some kind of resonance. I think that's why I write them, is to give a voice to that sense of loss that for, you know, academically speaking, for the 1.5 generation, for those who were, you know, born in Vietnam but were raised in the US or elsewhere in the diaspora, that there is something that bonds you to this country, but then also a lot of your identity formation is also here. So what do you do with that loss? And how do you grieve that? I think it's only through words that I was able to articulate how weighty that burden has been. But it is also through words that I've been able to take shape of it and put it together and create something that's meaningful to me. I don't know if that helps.
So the question was, like, what more is there to grieve of the past, the history, which does involve the war? I think I'm a millennial.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't know anything about Gen X. That's why I just like, ooh, I don't know.
I meant it as a compliment.
No, it's okay. I'm not weird. I don't care what age I am. I always forget. Like, I have to count the math, and I'm bad at math, so it's terrible. I actually don't know much about the war. Yeah, I mean, I watched that Ken Burns documentary. Okay, but I'm interested in the war as it becomes a context for me to understand the war in family. The uncles who fight now, the uncles who use their children to fight with each other, right? Like, and how these fractures, these fissures, really like explode apart families, and how that violence. So we talk about intergenerational trauma, but I'm interested in how family dynamics. But it's not even just the war, it's also like the impact of all the things, what other bodies came into Vietnam and what did they do, where did they go, right? And that has impact on land, on communities, on families, right? And so I'm interested in, like, I don't know, thinking and tracing that. Because when I was a kid, I was like, oh, my mother is a monster, right? Like, why is she doing these things? And then I grew older and I was like, oh, well, yeah, okay, those things were bad. But she's not a bad person. She's a person that's been through a lot of things, who makes bad decisions, but she also makes other decisions that helped for me to thrive.
shit, how do I hold those two things together, right? And one way for me to understand is like, well, her family's like this, right? And then when I finally learned in my early 30s, like what 4 years of trying to get to the United States was like, then I was like, oh, that gives me another like schema for her 11-year-old self moving through those borders and boundaries. Which is to say, like, I'm still trying to understand what forms us and the families. And I started doing this project, just talking to strangers, but also asking and having pointed conversations within my own family, because I was curious what overlaps there would be, honestly. There's this funny, I think this is a funny story. I met a young engineering student at Western Washington University in Bellingham. She just came to reading, and then we just chatted. And I sat down, we recorded this interview, and she was talking about how one thing that I don't know why we got to this, but she was like, oh, I was almost late for work today because my dad always hides the keys in the house, but he doesn't remember where he hides the keys. And I couldn't find the keys, so I couldn't drive to work. And it was so annoying. She's like, I'm so mad at my dad. And I was like, my mother does that. She does it with everything, and then she doesn't, but she also locks herself inside the house, for safety, but then she cannot escape, so it's also a prison. And so we were like sharing stories about like, oh, parents, but I was just like, oh, your dad was a boat person, my mom was a boat person, something indelible shifts inside the psyche of like flight, right? I don't know. I'm not a scientist by any means, but I was just like, this is interesting. I was just annoyed at my mother and its own isolated thing, but here I'm talking with another person. And she had now had context too. She was like, oh, maybe, I think she was like less angry at her dad. And it was just interesting because we didn't grow up talking about that kind of stuff, and it became community. It's not cause and effect, but these kind of stories gave us like a different familial kind of history. Does that kind of make sense? It provides like a diasporic kind of context which shapes people's behaviors. And so I think, what else is there? Which is like, what are the small behaviors, acts within families that perpetuate, but what are their lineages? How do we trace that to the connected relationships that we have with people? That sounds really abstract, but I think that's what I'm trying to chase after. And yeah.
Thank you.
So this, I just want to say, don't watch Ken Burns' 18 Hours. Don't watch The Five Bloods.
No, definitely not.
And as a Vietnam War film specialist, there's nothing that speaks to me yet, but we're working on it.
Yes. Talking about this, so this exhibit where you are, right, with, in extensions of other poets is from vlogs by critics, right? We ask younger poets and writers in the communities to reflect on what it means for them, April 1930, 1975, right? Because a lot of people say, well, the war is irrelevant now, the Vietnam War is irrelevant, right? So we ask. And what we receive is so many relevant poems and artwork, and was very critical of those mainstream representation of the Vietnam War. So this is also very special for us to be here today in that space. And thanks for the Global Museum for letting us to be here, because then we can claim this space as ours, just like for us to do those readings and the discussion, for you to be here listening so attentively, It's like, yes, this is our space, and thank you all for making